listen, and I will also speak more about that.
1,000 kilometers of tarmac to maintain, and we have 6,000 kilometers of tarmac under construction. 20,000 kilometers of tarmac to maintain here in Kenya is actually the same for the other 6 or 7 East African countries. That's a lie, man. That might be...
Just a minute. Mof says that's a lie, man. What is your take? The person listening. If I listen keenly, Ruto said Kenya is maintaining 20,000 kilometers, which is already in place. It's maintaining. So we have a maintenance levy from fuel. Ruto also said Kenya is having 6,000 kilometers on construction. Therefore, there is a fuel levy that is being used to construct. Probably. Although he did not, Ruto did not say that. But we are talking about the cost of fuel, and Ruto is explaining why the cost of fuel in Kenya is a bit higher. Therefore, he's saying, apart from that we are maintaining the 20 kilometers, we also have 6 kilometers inbuilt. Okay? Mof is saying it is wrong. Ruto is a lie. He is lying. I disagree. Ruto is not lying. Because if you take 20 kilometers and you add 6 kilometers, we have 26 kilometers in place. On the table, we are presenting 26 kilometers. The minister in Tanzania, on table, he's presenting 16 kilometers. And then he said, when we add the East Africa combined, or the Eastern Africa combined, the 6 countries, we have 22 kilometers. Therefore, the minister in Tanzania is saying Ruto is lying, because Ruto is saying we are having 20, while the minister in Uganda is saying we are having 22. Now, who is lying? The minister in Uganda is lying because in Kenya we are having 20 already being maintained, and the 6 coming on board, meaning we are having 26. We are having 26. They are not even planning to have more roads, because he did not say that they are constructing any road in Tanzania. He only said they have 16. Therefore, Ruto is right by saying in Kenya we are having 20, and if you take the 16 kilometers in TZ and you add those ones in Uganda, in Rwanda, in Burundi, if you add all those ones in Uganda, guys, you cannot reach 26. So Ruto is not lying. Ruto is right. Let's listen to Maf.
For Uganda, I don't know what else. A small country come Rwanda, maybe Burundi, because Burundi na boga shitole. But if we start thinking of Tanzania, I understand why TZ would be offended. TZ we're going to peleka to. The only thing inafanyaga tunacha TZ ni the fact that somehow maybe our education system was a little bit better than theirs. They tried the Swahili thing, but they did not do it the right way. So
correct. Maf is saying Kenya is slightly ahead of Tanzania. I agree with Maf. Actually, we are not just slightly, but we are much ahead of TZ. Because what is the exchange rate of Kenyan shilling to TZ, to Tanzanian shilling? Maf, what is the exchange rate? So are we just doing slightly, or we are just much ahead? Tanzania is only defeating us because they have the latest or the modern airport, which actually in Kenya, the Genesis refused because Ruto wanted to have a modern airport using Adani. Therefore, we are draining behind because of the airport. But when it comes to other things, guys, if you are talking about 20 kilometers, remember what is the size of Tanzania, geographical size of Tanzania in terms of miles, nautical miles or kilometers? I think Tanzania is doing 1.5 of Kenya. Therefore, if Tanzania is 1.5 of Kenya and Tanzania is having 16, if you do the ratio of 1.5, it simply means Kenya is doing much better Meaning Kenya will be having even what is a half of 26 kilometers, which is actually 13. So 13 plus 26, Kenya will be having something like, is doing something like 39 in terms of percentage. What am I saying? I'm saying, based on geographical coverage of Tanzania being so huge, and they only have 16 kilometers, while Kenya is being slightly geographically small in size to Tanzania, and we are doing more kilometers to 26 kilometers, then we are much above board. You cannot compare the two guys. Maf, I beg to differ with you. I differ with the argument of saying Nairobi looks like a slum to Addis. Guys, those who have been to Addis know that there are just like 2 or 3 buildings that makes Addis a bit different, much better than Kenya. But we are not talking about infrastructure in terms of buildings, in terms of slum. Even when we talk about slum, guys, yes, the northern part of Addis moving towards the west part of Addis, bordering the South Sudanese, and going to the northern, North Sudan, guys. The place is dry and the place is not developed. Even there's a group that is claiming they want to divide Ethiopia into 2 countries. Ruto is talking about fuel and roads. Ruto is talking about fuel and roads. He's not talking about slums. He's not talking about buildings. He's not talking about the cities. Therefore, somebody should give us the road network in Ethiopia. Because are you trying to say that President does not know that the road network in Ethiopia is more than Kenya? President knows what he's saying. And remember, it's also to create a perception and to run a narrative. So, what could be the narrative Muaf is running? Muaf is running a narrative that Ruto is a liar. This is now what I want to call out. The narrative that Muaf is trying to run here. Muaf is running a narrative that Ruto is a liar, while the fact says that when we add the East African road network together, it is less than 26 kilometers that Kenya is doing. Full stop. If you want to throw stones to me, come to comment section and do that. Anyway, I love you guys. This is just the first video, and we shall carry on more and more videos. Maf, I don't hit you guys. Maf, you are my friend. We are only doing analysis, and let's call a spade a spade. Thank you. Bye-bye.